think everything's good. Yes, and we are live. I'm here with Julie. Julie, how you doing?
Hi, I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. I'm not going to make any inappropriate jokes now that we're live, okay?
Okay, sounds good.
So, to get us started, just talk us through your childhood, your background, your faith journey. Were you always Christian? I don't even know if you're Christian today. I can't remember. But talk us through everything up until today. How'd you meet that crazy guy, Christopher, and all that good stuff, okay?
Yeah, I feel like my story actually starts before I was born.
Yeah.
So I'm Cambodian, and my family is Cambodian. They came to the States in 1979. Um, I mean, I don't know how far back you want me to go or how much into detail,
Yeah,
but
yeah, yeah.
um, so my grandmother on my mom's side is the only grandparent that I know. So my mom's mom. Everyone had all the other grandparents had passed before I was born. So, my grandfather on my mom's side knew my dad. And in 1975, when the US pulled out of Vietnam, that was kind of when the war started for Cambodia. And so, my family, so we're kind of familiar with my dad was familiar with my mom's side of the family. My dad, although he was already married and he had children, um, he lost his wife and his daughter during that time. My grandfather also died during that time. So then my grandma, my mom's mom, she's like mid 40s, has 7 children. Her oldest is 20, which is my mom. She has like a 3rd grade education. And at this point, Pol Pot has fallen. Khmer Rouge has fallen. Everything's in chaos. No one knows what's going on. People are making a mad dash to Thailand. Some people are staying in Cambodia. My dad takes his son, my half brother, and meets up with my grandma and kind of helps take over and basically made arrangements for them to leave Cambodia, go through the landmines, pay for people to guide them to Thailand, to the refugee camps in Thailand. Oh,
Special guest.
um, so in 79, they get to a Thailand refugee camp, and usually people are stuck there for years. Like once they get to Thailand, they're there, and they're awful living conditions because they're refugee camps, but my family was only there for 3 weeks before they found out that they were sponsored by a couple in Rochester, in Minnesota, through Catholic Charities.
Oh.
And so that's how my family ended up in Minnesota. And I don't know, even to this day, when immigrants come, they have to be sponsored by somebody. So those sponsors are here on the stateside, and they help you find housing and get people enrolled in schools, help people find jobs. So it was, my family came over, it was 9 people. So my parents, my brother, my grandma, and then my mom's 5 siblings. So that was 9 total. My dad, because he was a teacher, he spoke French fluently. So he picked up English pretty quickly. And so he actually got a job with Catholic Charities and helped sponsor more Cambodians to Southeast Minnesota. So in the 80s and 90s, there was a lot of Cambodians and Vietnamese coming, and my dad helped do a lot of that. And I don't know if you're familiar with the movie The Godfather, but like my dad was like the Cambodian godfather.
Ah.
We were the first Cambodian family in Rochester.
Ah.
So now here's my grandma. She's like 45 years old. She's lost her husband. She also lost her youngest child. She's in a country where she doesn't know anyone. She doesn't know the language. She has no friends. The Nazarene Church here in Rochester was doing a ministry to Cambodians. And so I think my grandma started going there just to meet other Cambodians and to be able to speak her language and communicate with people. And she told me that growing up, they grew up Buddhist, my grandfather actually considered being a monk, so he was pretty devout. But she said that it never, like, she it never really struck a chord with her. But when she heard about Jesus and what Jesus had done, she was like, this is what I've been looking for. And so in 1983, she was baptized, the first Christian in our family. And I think Christopher might have mentioned this, but she was living with me and my brothers and my parents, and she would pay us $1 a week to go to church with her. So she would give us $1, but she would make us put it into like a piggy bank, and then she would give it to us at the end of the year. And so we didn't get it right away. We would have to like wait to get the $52 at the end of the year. And my dad, he did a really good job of acclimating to American culture. So he always said, when in Rome, do as the Romans. So he encouraged me to go to church, but he was orphaned at a young age and actually was brought up by Buddhist monks. And so he told me, you can go to church, but I'll never go to church because that would be like betraying the people that saved me. So I would go to church with my grandma, blah, blah, blah. And when I was about in 6th grade, I went to a teen camp, like a youth camp, Christian camp. And I remember I have a Bible here where my camp counselor wrote that I accepted Christ into my heart. Oh. I don't remember that specific moment. I just know that happened. And at that point, I started going to church on my own accord with, my grandma didn't have to pay me anymore. So I started making friends. And then actually that's when I met Christopher, was because he was also going to the Nazarene church. So I became really good friends with his sister, Kathy. Kathy and I are the same age. And that, I don't know if you remember, he talked about coming back from his camp after he, kind of gave his life to Christ, and they were doing Friday night Bible studies. I started going to those, but my parents, they were very kind of just like, it's a Friday night, you're going to a Bible study. Like, really, what are you doing? And so I went a few times and I didn't know what to expect because I wasn't sure, like, are they really doing a Bible study on Friday nights? And I went a few times and it was real. Like, they were teenagers, no adults, praying, reading the scripture. And I was like, okay, there's real teenagers who are doing this, who are really following Jesus. Like, I think I can do this too. And so that kind of sparked my growth during that time. My mom and I, we argued a lot. So she would ask me questions about Jesus, like, and kind of challenge me about my faith. And we would just fight. We would just argue. The ironic thing is she got a job at a convent here in Rochester. She still works there. She works in the financial office, and saw a different perspective of Christians that she, they didn't know any Christians, really. And so her working with Catholic nuns, she was one of the first lay people hired there. And I think how they treated her with such love and grace really opened her heart to Jesus. But she still had a lot of questions and she still had a lot of uncertainty because her dad was such a devout Buddhist that she wasn't sure she wanted to do this, So then we would argue a lot. And then my grandma would argue with her too. And it was just a lot of Asian women arguing about religion. So, when I was 17, I went to another teen camp, and it was at that camp that God basically told me, Julie, you love your parents. You want them to know me and to follow me. I love them even more. They will come to me in their own time, and you will not be there. You will not be a part of that story for them. And it was really freeing for me because I felt like, when you know Jesus, like you want people in your life to know him too. Like you want that for them too. And I didn't know how to communicate that to my mom without arguing with her. I came back from that camp and I let go. Like I knew, okay, whatever God is going to do, he's going to do. And I need to trust him with my parents. And I stopped arguing with them about religion. Like I would just let them say whatever they had to say. I would listen, but I wouldn't necessarily engage because it just would end up going nowhere. That is why I don't like to debate about theology and religion. And so that's why I was hesitant to come out here, because I'm like, debating about theology and God just bores me and it frustrates me and I feel like it's futile. So I went to college. I went to a Christian college. Christopher and I went to the same college. After I graduated, I decided to go to China for 2 years and teach English. I intended to be a doctor, but after I graduated with my biology degree, I was like, I'm done. No more school, no more debt. I'm done. So off to China I went. That first year that I was there, I lived in a place where there was actually a pretty prominent Baha'i presence and practice. And so it was fairly oppressive. Like I went with a Christian group. So I went with a team of Christian women. We were all teaching English at universities. We lived together and we were there as a support group for each other. But I would wake up at night not afraid for my life, but there was such a darkness. Like I would wake up at night and it was just like this, not a physical oppression, but just a spiritual, like heavy, like just so heavy. And I had been in China for about 6 months and I was really homesick, like ready, not sure what I was doing there. It was so dark and difficult and I wanted to be home. And my mom called me, we could communicate, right? So this is back in the early 2000s, like 2002. So we could talk on the phone, but we had to be careful what we said because the phones are tapped. We knew they were tapped. We didn't know anybody was listening. China knew we were Christians, but they were willing to put up with that because we were native English speakers teaching their next generation of leaders, English. And so my mom called me up and we were just talking and I didn't tell her how I was feeling because I knew she was worried about me anyway. So I didn't want to worry her. I wasn't telling her how I was doing, how I was really doing. And she goes, I wasn't going to tell you this until you came home. But she said, I just feel like I need to tell you this right now. And I was like, okay. And she told me that about 2 months after I had left to come to China, she gave her life to Christ.
Wow.
And she did it with her mom, my grandma.
Mm.
And she said that it had been something that she'd been thinking about and exploring even outside of me. And so, and she was telling me all of this and I'm just praying that no one's listening because she's saying all the wrong words. And so I'm just like, okay, God, I pray for protection over us that she was telling me this. And it was what I needed. Like God knew I needed to hear that. He knew that I needed that encouragement. And that I didn't have to wait another 6 months before I went home. Like it was like that light that I needed in the darkness. And so I served my time in China. I came back between my 2 years, and that summer was when Christopher and I kind of started hanging out and talking a lot. And then we started officially dating, like after I'd already gone back to China. We were like, okay, let's date. Let's make this official. So I went back. So our first year of our relationship was long distance.
Another miracle. Long distance relationship.
Yeah.
They're not supposed to work.
Right. And, and it was funny. Like we would talk on the phone and, we would you did have to be careful. We did have to be careful what we said in terms of what was going on or whatever, but it was still wonderful. It was still great. And when he came out to visit, it was, I think we knew when he came out to visit in China, like I knew at that point, like that I was going to marry this man. And funny story is I did have a crush on him in like junior high when we were friends. And when we were engaged, I'd come home, we were engaged. We had already purchased a house. He was living in the house. I was living with my mom, my parents. But I was starting to move stuff into the house. And he found one of my diaries from junior high. So I'm going to tell this story because it's going to make both of us look bad, but also make me look really shallow. But anyway, he was like, well, this is my house. It's in my house, so I can read it. So he started reading it. He read it. He opened up to a page where he's like, where I had written, I don't know if I like Chris Rice. He's funny and he's nice, but he's not that cute.
Oh.
So, but then he turned the page and it was like, I love Chris Rice. I love Chris Rice. I love Chris Rice. That made up for it. So anyway, so that I think he's cute now. I love his beard. I love, he's
the first thing that struck me when I met him is like, wow, your hair is amazing. The texture of his hair, it's amazing. Yeah. He's good looking. He's good looking.
He is, and he has red hair, and I love redheads.
He might be getting better looking with age. That happens to a lot of men.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah,
I agree.
So I think he's one of the lucky ones, or maybe you're the lucky one. Yeah. You look good. Well, you're Asian, so you're always going to look good. You're always going to look young.
Yeah, my daughter is a receptionist where I work as a nurse, and she's my receptionist every other weekend. And sometimes they're like, "Are you the daughter? Or are you the mother?" Like they can't sometimes tell us apart. So anyways, so then it was, so my grandma was the first Christian. I became the second one. Then it was my mom, and we continued to pray for the rest of my family. We were, fast forward a few years, Christopher and I are married. We have a few kids, and my younger brother started seeking God. He would go to church with me and my grandma. And at some point he was like, this dollar isn't enough. This is boring. I hate this. I'm not going to church. So he stopped going. But he said something. Our oldest is Becca. She was probably like 4 or 5. And he told me that Becca asked him a question about God one time, and he didn't know the answer. And so he started looking for the answer. And a few years later, he called me up and he said, I'm getting baptized. Wow. And again, just God just continuing to work. And then a few years after my brother was baptized, my mom and 2 of her siblings decided to be baptized together on the same day.
Wow.
And so, I just feel like my walk with God, it's not just about me. It is about seeing what he has done what he has done with this Cambodian family who knew nothing but Buddhism, to bring them to a country, to bring us to him. My dad, I don't think that he would say that he's a Christian, but I have seen him change over the years. He went from telling me as a teenager, which I don't think he realized how hurtful this was to me. I don't think he realized how deep of a wound this was, but he said, I would hound him to go to church, and he would be like, stop asking me to go to church. You may go to church, but I will never go with you, and don't expect me to, and stop asking. Like, he basically is what he said. And he's a very loving man. He's a very kind father, wonderful, amazing father. And he said that I think he was just tired of arguing with me. And I think he just spoke his heart to me. And it was really hard. That was, I think, probably the most hurtful thing he said to me, Really? But he's changed over the years. He's now, when we get together, family gatherings, he asks my mom to pray for our meals before we eat. And he knows that she prays to Jesus, like that is who her Lord is. And so, I think he's definitely opened his heart to who God is and to who Jesus is. And I think been able to realize that seeking the truth doesn't necessarily mean that he's ungrateful to the Buddhist monks that raised him.
Of course. Yeah. Just get the grandkids to go ask him difficult theological questions. There you go.
Except he's a stubborn man. That man is so stubborn. Like if you start pushing him, he's going to start pushing. He's just going to dig his heels in. Like that's how he'll be.
Do you know the Sisyphon region of Cambodia, Sarai Sayaphaon or something like that? It's in the Bantai Manekchi province or something like that. Am I saying it wrong?
I don't know. I only know a few towns.
Oh, okay, because there's this guy Buntek Ngoy. He's called the Donut King, and he came from Cambodia to America, and he's a fascinating man. And so at first when you were telling me about your father, I thought maybe it was this same guy.
No.
But it's not this guy. He's not the Donut King. Okay. So anyway, you got to watch this documentary on the Donut King.
Okay.
Okay, you have to watch it. Real character, stubborn guy, family drama, and he's Cambodian. Okay. So,
that's so
yeah.
The donut.
And he might have some, a lot of Cambodians have the mixed Chinese blood, whatever. I think he might have some of that. But the Donut King, you have to watch it. Yeah, you have to watch it. Okay, and it's not always easy. Like he's a hero, but he's a complex character. That's just the way humans are, right? So I mean, you accept him for how he is, and there are always questions about a documentary. Is it showing the whole picture or part of the picture? And editing, it's hard to know what's the truth and stuff like that. But if you go in with an open mind, you form your own opinion about him. Okay, but we're going to talk after you watch that.
Yeah, that sounds good. That sounds good.
But the personality and the drive and the way he helped Cambodian immigrants, it was a passion and just the dedication. And he made a lot of money. He made a lot of money selling donuts. A lot of money. Yeah.
That's fascinating.
Oh, yeah. You definitely have to check that out.
Wow. Selling donuts.
So one thing about you, watching you talk, it's the first time I've seen this where I see Christopher in you, in your mannerisms, and I think he learned from you. That's the impression I'm getting. Certain gestures he does, like just when he talks, I'm pretty sure he learned it from you. Is that a possibility? Do you know what I'm talking about?
I don't really know what you're talking about. I mean, it's possible. I don't really know.
Not everything, but there's a certain way of speaking at times where I'm like, wow, that's just like Christopher. So, how many years have you been married now?
So we got married in 2005, so 18 years. Okay. But we were friends. I mean, we've known each other since we were teenagers.
Okay. So there's plenty of opportunity for some sharing of because my wife and I, we've been married 27 years, and I definitely picked up some stuff from her, and I'm not sure if she picked up some stuff from me, maybe a little bit, not as much, but it's usually the guy is catering to the girl. That's usually the way it works. Like the man wants to please the wife, right? I think more than the woman wants to please the man. I don't know. Maybe I'm biased. Maybe I'm biased, but I think the man tries harder to please the wife.
It's not that Christopher doesn't try to please me. I don't think that that's the case. I think he is the stronger personality of the two of us. Growing up Cambodian, female Cambodian, it's a fairly submissive role, and so, my dad was very much the head of the household, made the decisions. She was very supportive. They talked about things, but he was definitely the head, and so that's kind of like what I grew up with. And, I tend to go along with stuff. Like Christopher is more of the opinionated, and like he does the research, he does all, and I kind of like go along with it. So like he's the one that does all of, like, he'll get into tea, he'll get into coffee, he'll get into sauna, and he'll just research and he's very academic. And then for me, I'm more of like, I get to come along for the ride. I get to learn about that stuff. And then I get to drink the good tea and I get to drink the good coffee and I get to do the good sauna, and so I get to eat the good salsa that he learned how to make. And so that's how I get to reap the benefits of that. But I'm much more of like the go alonger of the two of us.
Well, you seem like a strong woman with a character for sure. And, the whole idea of the submissive wife is a very, very good thing because you're putting yourself submission. You put yourself under the mission of the man. And what is the mission of the man? The mission of the man is to serve you and to protect you and to do everything for you. So placing yourself under that is not weak. It's not a sign of weakness. It's not a sign of inferiority. It's just, hey, like, I mean, we all have a role to play, men and women, different roles to play. And some women are more masculine, some men are more feminine, whatever, that's okay.
Right.
And we can have, variations in that, that's fine. But generally speaking, the submission of the wife to the husband is a good thing because of the different talents and skills and responsibilities and duties that the man has versus the woman. We're biologically different and we're temperamentally different, generally speaking, but these generalities exist for a reason because we have a human nature and women really are different from men. And I resent the LGBTQ thing for many reasons, but not least of which is sodomy, but also because of the blurring of the lines between these, the nature of a woman, nature of man. It's like, no, that's precious to me. That's precious to me. Don't try to blur that.
Right. Right. Yeah. Christopher and I have had, a lot of conversations about this because, especially because our oldest is 16. And so like, this is what they're walking into is this culture, this interesting thing. And I mean, I'm not a super feminine woman. Like I hate romantic comedies. I'll watch Star Trek. I like TNG. That's what I grew up with. That's my favorite. I don't wear dresses. I don't wear makeup. I don't wear a lot of jewelry, but I am a woman, so, and Christopher, way more sentimental than I am. Like if he doesn't wish me happy birthday or happy anniversary, like I could care less. Like it does not bother me at all. Like it doesn't, it's not on my radar. Like we have Google Calendar to remind us of our anniversary. Like that's just, but he is the more sentimental of the two of us. And so, I think, like you said, I think it's a spectrum, it's a spectrum of feminine and masculinity, and we're all somewhere on that spectrum but I think there are inherent, like Christopher and I have this conversation where he's like, if you get together a group of women, like, I don't think that they're ever going to be like, hey, let's see who can kick this ball the farthest, or let's see who can get this ball into this hole. Like, I'm like, yeah, no, I don't think me and my girlfriends would ever do anything like that. That sounds stupid. So there are still inherent differences, even though it's a spectrum. And so, yeah.
Yeah. Well, the funny thing is, I don't know if I should tell you this or not, but Christopher's in the other room watching this live stream and he's in my live chat commenting. Yeah, I shouldn't have told you. Make you self-conscious. But he's there with his, his popcorn and his box of Kleenex, and it's like a rom-com now. He's watching his beautiful wife talk about him and he's crying, and
oh my word.
It's very, very touching. He's a very sentimental man. I'm just kidding you, Christopher. I know you're not crying. But
I've seen him cry like maybe once or twice. Like when Rebecca was born, our oldest. I can't remember if I've seen him cry again.
Well, you cried 3 times in this interview already.
Right. Yes.
Yeah. So
I'm a crier.
They're different. They're differences, and this is the thing. You're a strong woman, but you have access to your emotions. Ooh, that's exciting.
Yeah. When my kids were little, I read this book written by this, I don't even remember who the lady was, but it was called Loving the Little Years. And she had a chapter about emotions. And she basically said, like, emotions are like wild horses. They will take you to beautiful places. They can carry you to places maybe you can't get to by a car or whatever, like wonderful places. But she said, my takeaway was like, but if you let that wild horse lead you instead of you leading it, it will take you to places you don't want to go.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think that for me, that was just like pivotal. And like, I think emotions are wonderful. I think God gave us emotions to be able to feel and experience. But as a female, as a woman, like, you need to know how to rein that in so that you aren't using it to be manipulative or, whatever it is, and so, and it's hard. It's hard, like, we have emotions, but just like anything else in life, like, are you going to let it control you, or are you going to, by the grace of God, control it?
Did you ever watch the original series of Star Trek?
Well,
Kirk and
I've watched a
Spock?
few episodes here and there.
Kirk and
It's
Spock.
mhm.
Oh, okay. You're not too familiar. You're not too familiar with that.
Kirk or Spock, is that what you said?
Well, I was going to ask you like which character you resonated with, but you're not that familiar with it, so you might not have an answer.
I think in my head I'd rather be Spock, but I mean, but Kirk, with his adventure and his emotions, does things and goes places that Spock can't ever go.
Yeah. I always sympathized with, or not sympathized with, but sort of admired Spock more. But as I grow older, I'm starting to see, Kirk, the passion and all that sort of thing.
Right.
And on the Next Generation, I did like number one. He was my favorite, the womanizer. The guy who womanized all the women.
Riker.
Yeah, Riker. Yeah, I did like. I don't know why I liked him, but I just liked. I guess I like a charismatic kind of personality,
Sure.
and someone who's
Sure.
confident, maybe a bit narcissistic. That's always good. Your husband says she's Scotty, the Scottish engineer guy. So I don't think that's true.
Why did you say that?
He's probably being silly, but you'll have that conversation on your own with him later. But he also said that you're the heart of the couple, and that's a beautiful thing to say. Oh, that's so cute. But the archetypes on these silly television shows, sometimes they're revealing about ourselves. Which characters we resonate with, which ones we admire, which ones we hate, and all these sorts of things. But theater's been with us for a long time. But we do make choices, like you said. We do make choices. And sometimes it's education by the parents, or sometimes it's education at school or by a role model. And we realize, hey, I don't need to play my role this way, in this limited way. I could be more open. I could have different aspects to my character. Not that it's fake, but it's just like I have resources. How do I employ them? Or which ones are bad sort of things I don't want to encourage? Bad behaviors. I'm jealous. I'm angry. Grumpy or impatient, whatever. I guess what it comes down to really is vice versus virtue, and making better decisions so we could have more good habits and fewer bad habits. So what's your Christian walk like in regard to virtue ethics, and how you are striving to, for example, keep the 10 Commandments, and how does all that work together with your morality and trying to be a good person and to be strong and to be able to suffer well and all these sorts of things?
So I try to follow just the two greatest commandments, which is love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength, and to love your neighbor as yourself. And I think that sometimes in our walk with God, we feel like we're making the right choices, or we're doing the things that we should do sometimes, but they're sometimes not rooted in love. They're rooted in pride, or rooted in, well, I'm doing the right thing so that I look like I'm the right type of person. And so, I'm going to defer to Christopher a lot because I think he's just very wise in some things, but he loves his younger brother. His younger brother and him, he has a pure love for Greg. And so whenever he comes across a situation, like maybe he has a friend that he feels like he needs to say something to him, like as sharp iron sharpens iron or whatever, he would always think about his brother Greg and be like, well, what would I do if this was Greg? because he loves Greg and he knows that whatever he does, hopefully is rooted in love. And so he kind of uses that as a filter. And I've kind of like had a similar thing. Like, obviously Greg is not my younger brother, but just thinking before I do, thinking before I speak, to go, is this out of love for God or love for my neighbor or not? Because if it's not, then I don't need to be doing it. I was a stay-at-home mom for a lot of years. And so I feel like my life was being a wife and being a mom. And it's easy to love and have a prayer life and walk with God. I feel like it's easier when those are my only roles. And so now I'm a nurse, I work full time, and I have coworkers who are not Christians, and my life isn't a little bubble anymore. It's not this bubble of my husband and my kids. And I think the struggle that I have now is not getting caught up in what they do and being light and salt. There's a lot of swearing at my work. I don't have any issues with swearing. I swear, whatever. But I don't want that to be a regular part of my speech. Like, I don't feel that it needs to be, and that is something that is right now something that I struggle with. And I don't want to have a filthy mouth. I want what comes out of my mouth, comes out of my heart, is what makes us clean or unclean, right? So I feel like that's kind of where my virtue, where I want to go with that. They know that I'm a Christian. They know that I believe in God. I do have a coworker he's atheist, agnostic, mocks Jesus, but is very respectful of my walk with God. He knows, he's like, you're one of the more thoughtful Christians that I've met in my life. And so I don't think he openly mocks Jesus as much as he would normally, because I'll call him out on it. And so, but I want to do it in a way that's loving. I don't want to be like continuing to drive whatever idea he has of Christianity and Jesus. I want to actually turn that on its head. And so that's a challenge too. So.
Yeah. I want to, this is a bit of a strange question, but I just want to ask you point blank and get your honest impression, without thinking about it too deeply. Just give me your gut reaction. Okay.
Okay.
How would you distinguish being rational from being reasonable? Give me your take on that. What if you were forced to say there's a difference between being rational and being reasonable, how would you characterize the difference? And it doesn't matter if you're wrong, just tell me what your intuition is.
Well, I think that we can rationalize our actions to be reasonable, even if it's not really reasonable. I think we're good at rationalizing things. I think we as humans, that's why people murder, lie, steal, whatever. We can find ways to make it okay for us to do what we do. But I don't necessarily think that I don't think murdering somebody is reasonable, but I think in my head, I could probably rationalize it so that I could actually do it and feel okay doing it.
That's interesting. That's a very interesting take, because with my last guest, I was on his podcast and we simul-streamed, but in any case, it came up as a question, the distinction between being rational and being reasonable. And my friend and I are both men, and we both said, well, I don't think there's a difference. But I had the distinct impression that if I asked a woman, that they would have an intuition, and you had a good intuition. So what it sounds like is reason is higher than these sort of rational cogitations that we come up with, because we can do calculations and draw a graph, and here's the proof, and here's my argument, and it's all catering to what? It's catering to selfish desire.
Right. So, exactly.
Yeah. So that's an excellent insight that you had. And I'm not saying that you gave the definitive, absolute, perfect answer, but it's a good insight. And, we can take something away from that, rather than, you know, the two guys who were talking about it, we just said, I don't think there's a difference, because we're more intellectual about it and less connected to our heart and our intuition like a woman would be. So I think that you see something more human in the question than what my friend and I just discussed, and we just kind of brushed it off. But I did Google it, and the answer that Google gave is that reasonableness is more of a social dimension, and rationality is more like a stuck in your head sort of thing. And that does kind of reflect what you were saying. So it's interesting. More of a holistic, it's more of a holistic understanding that you brought to the question. And I think it's because you have a head-heart connection that's very organic. That's just my hunch. But I tend to see women as having that. Just like I admire that you could cry on camera or off camera. You know what I mean? It's like, I can't do that. So thank you for asking that. You did a good job. And that gives me food for thought. Because I never made the distinction before today. Like, I just thought it's like, to be rational, to be reasonable, and I thought it was the same thing.
I think there's a verse in First Corinthians. I can't remember what chapter, or where it is exactly, but I remember reading it in college, and it was like a light went off. Like, it was basically like, as humans, we can rationalize our actions so easily. And that doesn't necessarily make it align with what God wants, even though it makes sense in our head.
Well, you bring to mind with all of this citation from one of my favorite Catholic authors, Chesterton. He's a very witty author, and you may have read some of his stuff, but he talked about how we don't need a church that tells us that we are right where we already know that we're right. We need a church that tells us that we're wrong in those areas that we think that we're right. So that's sort of the humble and manly or virtuous, honest position to take when it comes to realizing that, you know what, I haven't got it all figured out. I don't have all the answers, and I'm probably wrong about some stuff. And I'm going to, you know, seek wisdom outside of my own set of opinions or whatever, right?
Right. Well, and I think that's why God gave us each other and the church. You know, I think back to my time in China, I had 2 different teams each year, but there was one gal, her name was Harmony. She's African American, Baptist, Southern, like went to a what do you call it? Like a historically Black college. Like, so she was very much she was very aware of race, but Baptist. So everything was very black and white for her. And she and I got along really well. We were really good friends. We had the same sense of humor, but she was very much like, well, God is just, so you need to be holy as he is holy, because we serve a just God. And I would be like, yes, but he is also loving, and his love reaches beyond the heavens. Like, and his patience is loving kindness is beyond what we can comprehend. And I think the two of us learned so much from each other that year. Like, she learned to be more gracious, and I learned to be like, well, I do need to search the scriptures, and I do need to know beyond what my feeling is about this. Like, what is God saying about this? Like, yes, he is just, Julie. So you better get your ducks in a row here and figure out, you know? And so, but I think a lot of times when we go to our churches, I go to the Nazarene church, I go to the Methodist, and we all have our own little echo chambers, you know, and I think there's less of that ironing, sharpening iron. You know, I've watched like 3 of your podcasts. Okay. Christopher's like watched all of them. He loves this stuff. Like he thrives, I think, on this stuff. He just really enjoys it. And I'm glad that he has an outlet for it, because for me, I'm just like, I'm bored. And then like you guys use words that I don't even know. Like, I think he said something like, he was so excited for this last one that you were on with Kevin. And I popped in for just a second. He's like, yeah, David's going to ask you about moralist nihilism or something like that. And I was like, I don't even know what you just said. I don't know.
Mereological
Yeah,
nihilism.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I'm like, I don't know what that means. And so, but he loves that stuff. So I'm thankful that he's got an outlet for it to really sharpen himself in this area because I'm
Yeah,
not in.
well, the thing about my podcast, I'm more excited just to meet people and to hear their perspective and their story and what they're excited about, um, than to argue. Although I do enjoy arguing, and I do enjoy unraveling some intellectual questions
Mhm.
and examining, trying to discover the truth and, asking tough, sophisticated questions about ultimate reality and struggling with it together. And
Yeah.
I also enjoy, there are other types of guests where it's very antagonistic, like this person hates me and my religion and they're going to
Right.
attack, and then
Right.
they attack and I defend. I also enjoy that. So
Right.
there are
Right.
many kinds of interactions, and I tend to adapt myself to the guest rather than to force them into some predetermined mold. Okay, this is what my show is like. We're going to do like this, because I'm here to discover. I'm here to discover, right? I'm here not only to discover ideas and stuff like that, but to discover the person, right? That's on the screen in front of me. Like that's very exciting.
Yeah. So I would recommend the other husbands on the show. Like if you want your wives to come on, I think like I see that side of you. Like
Yeah.
I've seen enough episodes be like, okay, he's a good listener. He's just going to ask questions. He's not going to argue with me. He's not going to like throw big words at me and make me feel stupid or whatever, And so I think, I don't know, like I think as females, we tend to be more like, not that we don't want to be challenged, but I think it's hard for, again, painting with a very broad stroke. I mean, very broad paintbrush, um, to not take things personally, So like if you are asking me about a belief and you're challenging me my belief, I have to learn to not think of it as that you're challenging me and you're critiquing me. And I think that's something that Christopher and I have had to learn. I've had to learn in our marriage. Christopher is like he's an idealist, So if he thinks something should be a certain way, he's going to try to push for that. I'm much more like, why can't you just be happy? Like the dinner was good. Like it doesn't have to be perfect, And so I've had to learn to like when he goes, this dinner is really good, but it needs a little bit of salt or it needs a little bit of this, like to not take that person and be like, you hate my food, and be like, okay, I can do that next time. And to be able to hear that, um, to be and to be thankful, but still have growth. You know what I mean? So
Thank you for the insight. And yeah, I'm gonna clip you saying that and send it to the men to show their wives, like as a sales pitch to bring them on. Don't be scared. Come on, you can come on my podcast. But I have a little anecdote that just came to mind when you were talking about your cooking. This is just a tiny little anecdote. When I was at church for a retreat, it was like, all day retreat, whatever. And with readings, and there was a priest there that was giving instruction and prayer and meditation, and we had lunch, and it was a Cambodian group, okay, because it just so happens I belong to confraternity. Well, it's not a confraternity, but it's the Saint Louis de Montfort. He did a consecration to the Blessed Virgin Mary, and it's very famous. And
okay.
there's a group that gets together here in Montreal, and they happen to be mostly Cambodian.
Oh,
Okay,
interesting.
yeah. So just coincidence, but
Yeah.
they cooked up a lot of food for the lunch. A lot of food, too much food. Okay, and I don't eat garlic and onion, and it was full of garlic,
Oh,
full of garlic. Okay,
yep.
and so it tasted okay. It tasted good, but it was strong.
Hmm.
The garlic taste, I don't mind it, but it was too much, too much. And then it hit my brain, and I overdosed. Like it was like I'm very sensitive to garlic, so I was
Huh.
overdosed on garlic. So when we did some more meditations and instruction, and they sent us into the chapel to pray and meditate, there were flashing lights in my brain because of the garlic. That's how much garlic was in this Cambodian food. Okay, so like I'm serious. It was like a disco show of lights in my
Really?
peripheral vision. Yeah, like a disco of shifting colors and stuff like that. And I know it was the garlic. I know 100% it wasn't the demons. It was the garlic.
That is fascinating.
Yeah.
Have you had that happen to you before?
No, that's the only. I have a bad reaction to garlic. I get like
Okay.
foggy head,
Oh,
stinky breath. I get sore throat. I get upset stomach, and I get digestive problems, and I can't sleep, and I have sexual dreams and stuff like that. So there are many stories of folklore where the sexual energy goes up when you have garlic.
huh.
That's one of the symptoms I get too. It's not pleasant. So
Wow.
but when I ate the Cambodian food, it was like way more intense, and I
Yeah.
had the visual effects, and I just felt horrible for a long time. So
Yep.
no
It's
offense to the Cambodian community, no
none
offense.
taken.
It's
We
just
eat a
my
lot of garlic. We eat a lot of garlic. Yes. We there's this I love seafood. So my grandma, we would buy blue crab from the Asian food store. We would steam it, just cook it, steam it real simple. But then we would make this vinegar, black pepper, salt, and garlic sauce to dip it in. And it's like raw garlic chopped up in vinegar. And you would dip the crab meat into the sauce. And Christopher hates it because I smell like garlic and crab for like 5 days. And so I finally stopped eating it like that. Now I just do like a little bit of lemon juice or whatever. But he would just be like, he could not. I'd have to like brush my teeth right away, and like I don't even know.
that doesn't work.
I
It
couldn't
doesn't
mask
help.
it, so we just
Nothing helps. It's only time. Only time will heal the wound.
yeah, yeah. He hated it.
It's a body chemistry thing. We all have different body chemistries. Like with
Yeah,
perfume, like some people smell good with perfume, and
right.
another person can wear the same one, it doesn't smell good. And it's the
Yeah,
same thing with
yeah.
people. Some people eat garlic and they don't stink, but other people do, and I stink really badly, like out of everywhere. But that's just the way it
Really.
is. But I used to eat a lot of it without any problem when I was younger.
Oh,
So it
interesting.
developed later in life, but oftentimes these allergies that develop later in life,
Yep.
it's the only one I'm aware of is the allium family, garlic and onions. And my father also complained that he had the same problem later in life with garlic, and
Okay.
he had a problem with tomatoes. I don't have any problem with tomatoes.
Okay.
I eat tomatoes all the time. I don't think Cambodians eat tomatoes too much. Do you?
We don't eat tomatoes as
No,
much. No. Mm-mm.
not as much as the Italians.
No, for sure, definitely not. No. No. Tomatoes are like kind of like maybe we'll throw it in a stir fry or something like that, but it's not
Okay.
anything. I know of one soup that we have tomatoes in it, but it's actually a Vietnamese based soup, so it's not Cambodian.
Uh,
But other than that, not a lot of tomatoes. Mm-mm. Potatoes, no potatoes.
uh,
Sweet potatoes, but not white potatoes.
uh,
Pretty rare.
mm.
So, yeah.
So back to the church stuff. I mean, Christopher did mention to me, and we're probably going to wrap it up in about 10, 15 minutes, but Christopher did mention to me that you're both involved in thinking about what church is, like what is church and what it's supposed to be. And
Hmm.
so to the extent that you're involved in that sort of quest for
Yeah.
meaning and stuff like that, maybe just
Yeah.
talk about it from your perspective, like where the emphasis is on your side and the motivation where it is on your side.
Um, so he was the one that started all of the thinking about what is church. Um, and I think at a similar time frame, we were going to this church, and what I loved about this church was I would go to the women's Bible study, and it was basically we would do a Bible study, and then we would have a time, like the last 20 minutes would be just a time of talking and prayer, and I loved that. But then what happened was they changed the format of that Bible study to we would watch a video of a woman preaching, and teaching, and then we would spend like maybe the last 5 minutes in prayer. And I really didn't like that change. So I was like, I get a sermon Sunday morning, I get a sermon Wednesday evening. I don't need another sermon in the middle of another one. And I'm not talking to anybody. I don't know what's going on with anyone. And so I think that kind of happened at the same time when Christopher was like, what is church? And I was like, good question. And the most growth that I had in my life, I feel like, was when I was in China. We were on a team. We were all from different denominations, but we had a single purpose of sharing the love of Christ with the Chinese people. And we met almost daily together and ate together, prayed together. We would meet every morning before our day and go, okay, what's everybody doing today, and how can we pray for each of us today? And we lived in the same apartment, so we saw each other regularly. And it was just like such a beautiful sense of fellowship and growth that I have not had since then. And so when we were talking about church, and we were talking about, and Christopher had the same thing, but his was like on short-term missions trip, like 2 weeks or here or 2 weeks there, where you would go and you would put aside all of your differences and the body of Christ to these other people. And one of my students said to me something that I'll never forget. She said, I love how you love each other, talking about me and my teammates. And for her, and she was a Christian, and she said, the love that you have for each other points me to God. And it was just like, I mean, that's what the scripture says. They will know us by our love, And so then we go, now I'm here in this church in the States, and we're trying to do like vacation Bible study. We're trying to be a big church, but everybody's exhausted because there's not that foundation of love and fellowship and being together, but yet you're required to go and minister. And Christopher and I are like, you can't minister when you're on empty. Like who's going to be attracted to that when you're trying to minister to people who need Jesus, but you are burnt out? Like what are they coming to? And so Christopher and I, we left that church. We tried an iteration of like a home church within that church where we opened our house every week. And, like the only thing that we did was we ate together, and then we talked and we prayed. And that's all that we did. There was no Bible study. There was no sermon. There was, and we did it for about 6 months. And the people that came, there was a few weeks where it was like a lot of people, but a lot of them didn't come back because
of the garlic.
Yeah, pretty much. Garlic and no tomatoes. So, and so it was that, and we basically told the pastor at that point, we want more of this. Like we want more. And I think people want more of this. So how can we do more of this? And the answer was, I don't feel that God is leading me in that direction, that God is leading our church in that direction. We left on good terms. We still speak with them. We still love them dearly and pray for them. But so when we left, it was hard. And right now we are in prayer about what to do. Because right now I feel like we are starving. I think Christopher and I want a feast in terms of fellowship, but we're not really getting anything right now. So Christopher has a men's group that he meets with once a week. I don't meet with anyone right now. We're not going to church right now. And it is difficult. I don't think this is how God created us to live.
Do you think that you'll be fed by our weekly meetings that we're going to do on my podcast, you and I?
I would like somebody local. And I don't really need the whole world to see it. I don't need comments in the live chat about what I believe. So, you know, and it's so hard because I think there's a part of us that like wants to meet people who are like us, who like good coffee and like good food and, you know, whatever. But then there's part of us that's like, but we really just need to be with the body of Christ. And I don't know. I mean, when you think of it, you can pray for us, and that is, so we don't know. It's been something that we've been praying about and going, what are we doing? Like, what are we looking for? Do we just join a church and just pray that that's where we're going to find what we're looking for? Do we make it happen? Do we start something? And, you know, I think with homeschooling the kids, me working full time, like, I don't think we have headspace to start something on our own. Like, I just don't think it's going to work. But, you know, I say that and who knows? God's like,
Mhm.
So I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't
well,
know.
you know, the question of community is a really it's a sore point with me because, you know, I'm the only one really in my family that converted, and you know, my parents are they I guess are some sort of Protestants or whatever, but they're not really going to church or anything. I don't know what they believe, but um, you know, my sisters are both atheist, and my nieces are all three of them are atheist, and my friends are all atheist, and so I had this conversion,
Hmm.
but I didn't have a community that was integrated. Okay,
Yeah. Yeah.
they weren't integrated into my life, and I was not integrated into that because, you know, my wife is not practicing. You know, she's raised Greek Orthodox, and uh, there's no desire on her part to get into religion. You know,
Yeah.
not at this time. I mean,
Right.
I think things are happening. Things are
Yep.
happening, but you know, on their
Yep.
own time, just like you said
Yep.
with your mother there.
Hmm.
Things are happening, but you know, it's not like we're both on the same page right
Yeah.
now. Okay,
Yep. Hmm.
COVID did help with sort of bringing her on board with some of the, you know, good versus evil kind of stuff, basic questions, you know, but
Hmm.
you know, the basic idea of community is very challenging for me. I go
Hmm.
to my little Catholic parish and I say hello to a couple people, just nothing deep, and
Yeah.
you know, I try to make the priest feel loved because it's a lonely job being a priest too, you know.
Yeah. Yep.
And so I talked to him, you know, went to confession this morning. I talked to the priest. I always make a point to thank them, you know, because it's a
Hmm.
thankless job sitting there listening to a bunch of
It is.
sinners telling their sins.
Yep.
It's a very
Yep.
thankless job. And there was
Yep.
a woman actually came in today. It was a nice opportunity for me because she came in and she picked me of all people to come and ask, like, hey, can you help me? This woman that I'm caring for, she's in a wheelchair out front. She wants to come in, but there, I don't know, is there an elevator? Is there a ramp? And so I went and tried to help her, and I asked another guy if he'd help us. We could lift her in her wheelchair. But in the end, she decided she was too frightened. It was too dangerous to try to lift her up so many stairs and stuff like that. So,
Mhm.
you know, that whole question of accessibility, that's a separate topic. But the idea of community, it was a rare occasion where I was actually involved. I felt like useful, even though we didn't find a
Mhm.
solution, right? But
Mhm.
at least I could say that I care, I'm trying, and like
Yeah.
like we want to get those wheels running in the community so that it's just basic common sense. Like, we have needs, and what do you need, and what
Right.
do I need, and you know, that's the basic thing, which is
Right.
it's missing from my Christian walk, you know,
Yeah.
and it shouldn't be
Mhm.
that way. It shouldn't be that way.
Mhm.
And, you know, I've read canon law. The Catholic Church has canon law, big fat book about, you know, everything. And it's very well outlined, like that the priest has to be involved in the community in his parish to
Mhm.
know and to serve everyone, not just the Christians,
Right.
not just the Catholics,
Right.
not just the Christians, but everyone in the parish,
Right.
to know them, what they're going through, and to, you know, counsel them
Yeah.
and to help them and visit the sick and these sorts of things.
Yeah.
Now, is it practical for the priest to do that? No, because they're run ragged today. The church is in crisis financially and every other way. And, you know, formation isn't always that good anyway, but there is an ideal, and then there's the reality. And in between the
Yeah.
ideal and the reality, you're just left a little bit hungry. Like you said, you're starving to death for the real walk with Christ, because it's a multi-dimensional thing. It's not just me and God. It's a community, and it is the body, the mystical body of Christ. And so we feel that. You feel that. I feel that. Christopher feels that. We all feel that. I mean, there are people that are, by the grace of God, in a lively community that's actually living it out as close to the ideal as possible. But I'm not in that situation, and so I can sympathize with you. You know.
Yeah. And I think sometimes we also settle, you know, and so I think that's the tough thing, is where Christopher and I are like, we don't want to settle, but like you said, that ideal and reality, like where do we go? What do we do? I don't know.
Well, I mean, I don't want to complain too much, but I mean, I have some more complaints. I'll just put them out there. I often complain about this on my podcast. It's like the church is empty. It's like I'm sad and I'm embarrassed. The church is empty. I mean, there's more than enough in the Catholic Church, and I'm not speaking theologically. I'm speaking about the physical brick and mortar building. There's enough in there to draw in everybody. Doesn't matter what you believe. Come in and look at the beauty, listen to the music, and, you know, be respectful that there's a Christian celebration here going on with the sacraments and everything. Be respectful. But for the love of God, like, come in and appreciate this cultural thing that is beautiful.
So it's really been interesting. This last year, Christopher and I have been going to different churches, like Catholic masses, different, you know, Greek Orthodox. And growing up, going to church, I still was very uncomfortable walking into these churches where I didn't know anyone. I went in with my husband and with my kids, and it felt so awkward to me. And I felt so uncomfortable, even though I know Jesus. I'm here to worship him. I'm here to hear from him, maybe, or even just observe what's going on in this service. But I did not feel comfortable. Like, not that the people were uncomfortable or anything like that, but it's just, when do I sit? When do I stand? Where do I sit? Like, when do I kneel? Like, well, what is this song? I don't know this song. And there was just so much unfamiliarity. And I was like, I'm a Christian. I know Jesus. I love Jesus. He is my Lord and Savior. And I feel like an alien in this service. And I think, what non-Christian is going to walk into this building and be like, this is what I want? You know, I'm so at home, you know, and I don't know. I don't know if as we go, go into the end times, I don't know, we can have a whole nother discussion about house churches and house buildings, church buildings versus house churches, and persecution and all of these things. Like, I mean, is this the direction we're going anyways? Is the direction of meeting in homes, in secret, I don't know.
Yeah. Well, you know, to draw a sort of parallel, you know, and I agree with everything you said, by the way, but to draw a parallel in secular society, you know, we went through COVID, and I'm a nonconformist, so I just swam against that stream, and, you know, at all costs, ready to die for that, you know, for sure. But the Catholic Church went with the tide of the world. It was worldly, okay, for the most part. My bishop did stand up for me, and he did tell me that I was allowed to go into church even though I didn't have a passport. But the people at the actual door at the church wouldn't let me in, and they called the cops, and I was physically abused and stuff like that, and thrown out, barred for life from one of my favorite chapels. So there's a worldliness in the church, even though my bishop was on my side, but the power structure isn't being respected. Like, I kept talking about the hierarchy. They didn't even want to hear about it, you know? So there, like, again, there's the theoretical ideal about what's supposed to happen, and then there's the reality. So I'm aware of that, and it doesn't shock me too much. It's disappointing that the church is worldly. It's disappointing. Just like it's disappointing that the churches are empty. It's
Yeah.
disappointing, like the sound systems they use make it so you can't actually hear what they're saying.
Hmm.
You know, partly because it's empty and it's echoing too much. And there are many, many things that we have to put up with and tolerate,
Right.
which are disappointing and sad. But yeah, because of COVID, you know, there was a sort of secret underground secular church that would meet. It was like not religious, but it was kind of religious because there were freedom fighters who got together, and I found out about them. A friend told me about them, and we had these secret meetings during COVID, during the lockdowns. And here in Montreal, we had curfew, if you can believe it. You know, we had curfew
Wow.
and it was very strict here. Yeah, very strict. So we would meet even during curfew, even though it was
Yeah.
illegal or whatever. And it was invigorating because why? Because we felt like we were alive, that we were not going to cave to, you know, these tyrannical measures,
Hmm.
and we don't
Hmm.
agree with them, and
Yep.
we are free to have a difference of opinion. And I mean,
Yep.
whatever, you know, and no disrespect to you if you bought the narrative or whatever, but you know, to each his own.
I've got stories for you. Yeah. I mean, I was a student. I went to nursing school during COVID. I went back to school. I got my second degree, my nursing degree during COVID. Um, and I had two clinicals. I had one clinical in a hospital. The vaccine had just come out. And of the 20 patients that I cared for, two of them were in there. One had a heart attack and one had a stroke within days of getting the COVID vaccine. Yeah. So it was,
Coincidence. It's just a coincidence, folks. YouTube.
it's just a
If
coincidence.
YouTube,
It's
if you're
just
listening,
a
YouTube, that was
coincidence.
just a coincidence. There's no connection. There's no
No, I
correlation.
think how, I mean, I talk about this, but I work in assisted living. They were locked down during COVID, and the amount of depression and loneliness that they felt was, I think, wrong to have had that inflicted upon them.
Of course. Of
Most of
course.
them are like, I'm 80, 90, just let me live my life. And they were quarantined in their rooms. They could not leave their rooms. Meals were brought up to them in their rooms. And the level of depression was astonishing.
No, no,
Like
no.
they just were like, what's the point? What's the point of me living?
It's demonic. You and I will do another stream on another platform where we can talk openly. Okay, it's depressing. It's really is sad and depressing. But you know, it is. You know, when I talked about the reason I'm talking about this is because even on the secular level, there's
Yes.
this idea that you go underground and then
Yep.
it could be real.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing with the church. It's like, I'm disappointed with the way things are going. And why don't those of us who are like-minded Christians just connect? And we know it's organic. We know it's real. We know that it's not
Mhm.
forced. It's not formulaic, and it's not some top-down thing that's
Right.
forced on us. Like you were
Right.
saying about that stupid video. It's like, that's like when I went to do training for some job that I had. It's the most boring thing ever. They can make an hour seem like an eternity when you have to watch this video,
Right.
even if
Right.
it's a topic you're interested in.
Exactly. Yes.
It's
Right.
not the way. It's not
Right.
the way. It's dead. It's not alive. We have to connect
Right.
to people and
Yep. Yeah.
participation. You know.
Yeah. So we don't know what to do. All that to say.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we're all in the same boat. You know, like I mean, I believe that I found the church that Christ built, and that I belong to that church, and all the means of salvation are there. It's the fullness of Christianity, and blah 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 blah. But I also believe that you're Christian and that you know, your struggles are the same as mine. And I'm dissatisfied, you're dissatisfied, but we are being, you know, fed. I guess that's the word a lot of Protestants use, like being fed or not being fed or whatever. But we are being fed, you know, enough to keep us alive, keep our faith alive, and we pray and you know, we have
Right.
communion with each other and these sorts of things, and we seek it
Well,
out, and
and I think God is still working.
for
Like
sure.
just because I'm not in a fellowship doesn't mean that God is no longer working in my life. So I still do see God in my life. I just would like to see more.
Yeah, 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 yeah,
So
yeah. Well, it's been excellent talking with you. I wish we could talk longer. I have to get back to my wife here. But you know, I'm glad you took the plunge to talk to me. You weren't sure what exactly it was going to be like, but you came and you talked to me. So I appreciate your courage. And you had a lot to say. You had a lot of insights and intuitions, and you're very open and honest and bright. So I hope you come back again sometime.
Maybe.
Every week.
No.
Every week. I'm just kidding. That's your husband.
No.
Your husband will come every week if I ask him. He'll come every week. He'll come every day. He'll come every day. Twice on Sunday.
Well, he does enjoy how you approach things. You know, I think that the fact that you interview all sorts of people from all walks of life, like I feel like that's how we should be, like listening and meeting. And I think what you do probably impacts more than what you probably know.
Yeah, I don't see the impact, but I also ask God not to show me the impact because it's better to see it in heaven, right? It's better.
Right?
It's going to be better. Because otherwise you've had your reward, as Jesus said.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. So excellent to meet you.
Me.
Yeah, it was beautiful meeting you and talking to you, and take good care of yourself and take good care of your husband and kids, okay?
Sounds good. We'll do.
I love you. We'll talk soon.
Okay. Bye-bye.
God bless you. Bye-bye.